Given all that you've covered, who are ULAs good for in today's world then? Mark Smith, if I could ask you to start.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, ULAs are good for organisations scaling at a fast pace. You know, if you're a company that is growing exponentially, not too many of those these days with the pandemic, but if you're growing really rapidly and you think, well, you know what, I'm happy with the Oracle product set, I'm going to use that to develop a number of systems, then they are a good tool, provided you keep them under control. So, you know, at the outset, having access to all these software products and knowing what you're deploying, having a strategy that is 100% focused on Oracle, so you know that the assumption there is that all these products are going to fit together, going to work together, and you know maybe even some of them pre-integrated, all that type of stuff. So if you're just delivering lots of enterprise applications and complex IT architectures, you know, there's loads of tools there, lots of Oracle products, pretty much everything that you could need to deploy these systems. So, you know, so when you set out from this journey, you feel quite confident that you've got a big set of products to choose from, and you can deliver a number of systems. And obviously, the last thing, as Mark said, these ULAs are really good for Oracle because they are a huge revenue generator.
They are, Mark, and it's just finish off on the slide there. I think there are clients out there where ULAs, I mean, they're good. All of them are good for Oracle. Put it that way. They're all good for Oracle. But there are some customers out there that ULAs are good for. As you said, any organization that is growing at pace, scaling at pace, perhaps even unforecastable space. You know, you can't even tell how many database licenses you need in a year or 2 or 3 or whatever it is, or whatever applications. You know, you're just ramping. And you just want to get product in as much as you can, as quickly as you can, and you don't have to worry about another purchase order here or getting some more budget there, and next month you do the same again. You just want to get a license mechanism in place that allows you to grow at pace, draw down licenses as many as you need, and get your business moving forward on that basis. You know, a ULA is a really good framework and licensing mechanism to do that. And so for those organizations who are looking at that as their near-term future, next 3 years, next 5 years, this can be a really good licensing model. We talked about earlier about simplifies things, makes budgeting easier. But if you're growing at pace, then a lot of clients who've done that, and I've got experience of this with other clients where they've grown at pace through a ULA, they've gone way beyond the financially costed usage, and they've got into using licenses that you can call for free. They got extra licenses that they never anticipated. They're not paying support on it for the duration of the ULA term. So they've really maximized value out of a ULA. And so if you're one of those lucky customers or lucky businesses that's absolutely flying or anticipates doing that over the next 3 to 5 years, a ULA is a fabulous, tool to use and a great way to license your products.
So it sounds like if you get the ULA right, it can be a really beneficial agreement. But what about the reverse of that? Who are ULAs bad for? Mark Smith, if I can ask you to start.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, as we said earlier, ULAs are great if you're growing fast, if you've got lots of projects, if you're in control of exactly what you're doing. But where the ULA is not good for you is when your estate starts to either become static or decline. Because one of the things is that when you made that ULA license agreement with Oracle, you did it around a set of products and a number of licenses that you're going to deploy. Now, if you didn't hit those numbers, then you're a loser because you're still paying for those licenses whether you use them or not. So that's when you become a big loser. Is if you bought a 50 processor ULA and you only deployed 10, then you're still paying for 50. And you will pay support for 50 going on. So you really have to be a growing organization, and you really have to understand how you're using these ULAs if you're not going to get caught with that. So a clear roadmap and defined milestones, but understanding the deployment of those licenses. And for example, what people don't do is they don't put the ULA milestone into a project plan. So, for example, let's say you're delivering 3 projects and they're over 3 years. You don't have a big red flag saying, I've got to get this done by that date because my ULA ends then. But people tend to think, oh, well, I've got a ULA, I'll just roll on. And that's when it catches them because they're not in control of it anymore. Oracle will come back and say, well, look, we've agreed this figure and the ULA is over now. So you really have to be on top of that and match it up to your projects. Anybody that wants to reduce their costs. So as we said, if you don't deploy all of your 50 CPUs, Oracle will not come back and say, well, that's fine, I'll just charge you for 10 then, because they said, well, I'm really sorry, that's where it is. You've made that agreement, and it's not my fault that you didn't deploy them. So, the Oracle aren't flexible on this if you don't reach your limit. So you really need to make sure that you factor in the Oracle agreement into everything you're doing, and you understand exactly where you are on your roadmap. And Oracle have got a big barrier at the end of that roadmap, so you need to make sure that everything's in order for that time. Audit protection, we said earlier that it will give Oracle some audit, or it will give you some audit protection from Oracle. That's true, but it's not guaranteed. So if, for example, 2 years into your ULA, Oracle suspect that maybe they could get some more revenue from you, then they may send the audit team in anyway. So it's not a guarantee. It's a good argument to say that it's less likely, but it's not guaranteed. And then finally, really the thing that people don't necessarily realize, I think, that the world's moved on. So when people used to have a Microsoft or an Oracle or a Sybase or something strategy, then that was the old world. In the new world, we've got all sorts of new things: SaaS, cloud, open source vendors, Kubernetes, all these other things, and people deploy systems differently now. So you don't make the strategy write everything to Oracle. You don't do that anymore. What you do is you take the best from all over the world and all over the best products, and you glue them together and you make your best system. You use RPA and AI and all those good things. So you don't say, right, I'm going to do everything Oracle. So I think the world's moved on from that time, and so be very, very careful that you understand the ULA if you go into one, because it might not actually suit you. Mark, what's your experience?
I agree with everything you say. I mean, ULAs are not good. The key thing to me is the top line here. If you've got a static, as a business, if you've got a flat or declining business in terms of financials, if you've got a static or declining usage of Oracle or Oracle estate going forward, then ULAs are best avoided, because as Mark mentioned earlier, when you get into these things, you set a baseline, whether it's 50 CPUs or 5,000 database licenses, whatever it is, whatever the baseline is in the ULA. If you don't use that and you consistently use less than that, and maybe you've got a declining curve during the term, you are still paying for all of those licenses and for their support for the duration. There is no mechanism here annually to just move to, turn the dial down, or true down in Microsoft terms, or whatever you want to call it. The mechanism is set with a hard floor, and if you work below that floor and don't consume as much as you anticipated, you will end up paying for a lot of licenses and support going forward, and you'll come out of this paying for it in the future, even if you credit out. And I do want to pick up one of the other point on this, which is the audit point. I had a client not so long ago who thought this was an audit defense program. They thought, get a ULA in, Oracle will leave us alone, they'll never come knocking at the door, it's unlimited, so why would they even bother counting from an audit perspective? We've got to be compliant if it's unlimited, isn't it? And they were audited by Oracle 2 years into a 3-year ULA, and they were found massively non-compliant. Not only for products that are outside the ULA, because usually clients have some stack of products in the ULA and then a bunch of products outside of ULA in the sort of standard licensing mode. So they were found non-compliant in the outside bit, which you can kind of suspect that may occur. But they were also found non-compliant for various elements of the stuff that's in the ULA. Where what had happened there, big global organization, they'd heard they got a ULA with Oracle. People in different parts of the world were thinking, oh, we can use any Oracle product as much as we like and just spin it out and deploy it up. And that's not the case. If you've got, for instance, database products in your ULA, but maybe the tuning pack or other elements of it are outside of the ULA, but your users think tuning pack's part of the ULA because it's part of the database stack, isn't it? So I can use that. So you can soon see how, if everybody doesn't understand about how ULA are licensed, what is licensed in the ULA, and what the restrictions are around that, so what you can and can't do, and nobody can get that communication out to every user of Oracle in a large global organization, you're inevitably going to get people spinning up things that they shouldn't do and doing things that they shouldn't do, which for the audit team at Oracle is manna from heaven. In they come. And they, as I say, not so long ago, I had a ULA client who thought it was audit defense, and he found that he was just as non-compliant as he was elsewhere. So just be very careful. If that's the only reason you're going into a ULA, don't do it.